Good afternoon. We now come to the fourth lecture in this application ethics series. And before I begin, I would like to know if any one of you have any questions on the previous lecture on data fabrication and falsification, which I talked about. In case you have any particular questions, you can please enter in the chat box, which I can answer later. Okay, so we move on to with this next lecture, where I would like to concentrate mostly on the third uh, evil, rather I would say, which is plagiarism. Uh, Plagiarism is something which I would consider as one of the most atrocious ethical misconducts, because I had said that whereas for the first two misconducts, that is fabrication and falsification, you only have a perpetrator. But in the case of plagiarism, you also have an identifiable victim also. So that is why I would rate plagiarism as one of the most unethical practices in scientific research. So I would like to now start the lecture. Before I start the lecture, I would like to acknowledge the contribution of Dr. Praveen Chadda. He is a very well-known expert on plagiarism issues in the country. He was a very renowned scientist from DAE. He was initially at the Bhabha Atomic Research Center, and then later on he moved on to Rajaramana Center for Advanced Technology, RRCAT at Indore. And for some time he was also the director for the UGC DA consortium at Indore. And then UGC has had brought out a volume in 2021, which is called the Academic Integrity and Research Quality. This is available on internet, the UGC website. I would advise all of you to download this volume and go through it. As well as Dr. Chadda has written several articles on plagiarism issues, which I feel that all of you should have a look at and read those in detail. Okay, so so last time I talked about fabrication and falsification of data, how it affects the scientific research, and what are the results of this data fabrication and data falsification. And that was also fairly serious sometimes, especially when you fabricate data. Uh, when the research field happens to be, for example, say medicine, so there it not only affects your own research, but then people who do a follow-up based on such papers, they may get into trouble. And not only that, it may also affect the subjects of the research, like because when you have medicine, you either have live animals, or you may sometimes have even human beings as subjects of research, and so they should not get affected in any manner. So there are dangers of fabrication of data, sometimes very serious also. Okay, so now we move on to the third one, which is plagiarism. So let's see what is this plagiarism is all about. So in very simple words, plagiarism is the appropriation of another person's ideas, processes, results, or words without giving appropriate credit. And as I said, while you have a perpetrator for plagiarism, there is also a very clearly identifiable victim of plagiarism whose credit has been stolen by the person who actually plagiarizes. And when can this occur? Plagiarism can occur again during the entire process of the research, like writing of a research report when the credit is not given, where it is due to the earlier research publications, and sometimes even ideas which are plagiarized, and that also can happen. And so all these, they violate ethics during the entire publication process. So the UGC, University Grants Commission, had actually brought out an official gazette, and this came about 3-4 years back. And so this is a very officially produced document. When you say Gazette of India, it's a government document. So here they have very clearly defined what plagiarism means, not only giving definitions of these things, but they have also laid down what constitutes plagiarism, degrees of plagiarism, and then they have also laid down what could be the possible punishments for various degrees of plagiarism. So here, of course, they have also stated officially that plagiarism means the practice of taking someone else's work or idea and passing them as one's own. So UGC is really serious about plagiarism now, and since all of you are fresh into your research careers and probably in the first year of your PhD work, I would really advise all of you to be very careful about this plagiarism business, because it is very tempting uh, to plagiarize others' works, and you may feel at some point of time that you may not be detected, but I think this is a very unethical practice, and if you are caught doing this nowadays, the consequences can be extremely severe. So what are the different types of plagiarism one encounters? uh, there are different kinds of plagiarisms. So when it is just a question of plagiarism of some other person's words or phrases or paragraphs or sentences, this is termed as text plagiarism. And this is one of the most commonly done plagiarism, and it can be fairly easily detected by using software which is currently available. There are a number of plagiarism detection softwares which are now available, like Authentic is one, Turnitin is another type, and Urkund is another software. And but of course, these are all mostly commercial softwares. One has to pay for it, and quite heavily at that. So it is usually the institutions which buy these software, and then the members of the institution, the faculty or the students, they can use this software to find out, to check about the possible plagiarism in their manuscripts. Then another kind of plagiarism, which again could be quite serious, is what is called as idea plagiarism. And this is where what happens is that a person's scientific ideas it's not just a text which is plagiarized, a scientific idea which has been propounded by someone, and this scientific idea is copied by someone else, and who terms it as his own idea or his own invention. Now the problem is the plagiarism software which is currently available, it is designed, the algorithms are designed to check mostly the text plagiarism. So this software, these softwares cannot detect actually when an idea gets plagiarized. Okay. So what I would term that as the softwares are not really philosophical by nature. So just to quote Dr. Chadda in a Nature article, to scientists, plagiarism of an idea strikes at the heart of research as a creative enterprise. Okay. So then there's another kind of plagiarism which is called self-plagiarism. This is a little strange, because here what happens is that a person who has already published some papers earlier, when he starts writing a new manuscript, he tends to repeat uh, text or phrases or paragraphs from the earlier publications of his own, and then puts them in the new manuscript which is writing up, without attributing these phrases or paragraphs to his previous papers. So, what is the problem here? The problem is that a person, the reader who reads the paper or manuscript, he feels that this particular idea or a problem, research problem, which is described in that particular paper, is new and it's not predated. Okay, whereas in reality that is actually predated, because he has simply picked it up from his earlier works and published it now, possibly terming it as new. So what happens is that these passages, they get repeated in subsequent publications of the same individual. So this can occur in two, three ways. Okay. Sometimes when a person is actually working on a very, very complex research problem, which may not be possible to describe, say, in one publication. So you need a series of publications where you build up a particular research problem. But when you do that, it is quite possible that you go on citing your, you go on repeating text from the earlier publications which you have written. But then, you see, as long as you give a citation to your previous work, it is fine. There's no problem. Okay. Then, of course, very often there could be an intentional copying of text, which is again not very advisable. So the best policy in such conditions would be, you have to cite your own work, your earlier work properly, so that your continuing contribution to a particular research area is assured. Okay. And again, this self-plagiarism can occur when, say, results are presented in a conference or a meeting, etc., and then you subsequently publish those same results in a journal. So there is a way of doing it, and now many journals have actually laid down certain norms when you actually describe a work which has been, say, presented in a conference, like a poster or like a small oral presentation or something, and then you actually present the results in a try to publish the results in a journal. So there are certain norms which are followed for this, and it's possible that you can still, by taking care, you can still get away without being called a self-plagiarist. Okay, then I would like to give you another quotation from Roig. Roig is a person who has written again a lot on plagiarism issues, ethical writing, and he is from the office of this ORI. And so he has written that ethical writing entails an implicit contract between the reader and the writer, whereby the reader assumes, unless otherwise noted, that the material was written by the individual listed as author, and that it is new and is accurate to the best of the author's ability. So what happens is, when you write a manuscript and publish a paper, okay, between you and the person who reads your paper, okay, there is a kind of an implicit understanding, okay, an ethical way. If you go by the ethical way, the reader will assume that the material was written by you independently as an author, and also that it is new and there's no other result which is previous to what you have written which is similar, and so he assumes that it is your own work, it is new, and it's original. So now what happens is that when the author actually replicates text which he has published earlier elsewhere, this should be made very clear to the reader. Okay, and how do you do this? This can be done by simply citing the original source where the text is taken from, and also again, for example, if I already published this particular work earlier, there could be certain copyright permissions to be taken, because the journal, you usually transfer the copyright for your manuscript to the journal. Nowadays, of course, many journals, they also have what is called a Creative Commons copyright, wherein they give you back the copyright for the text. So in that case, of course, you don't have to take a permission, but then it is bounding upon you that you must cite the original source of the text. Then again, when you write, say, proposals for obtaining funding from different funding agencies, here you can, of course, there's no problem when you actually cite your earlier work without any citation, etc. Because when you write a proposal for funding, these funding proposals, they are not published, okay? They are not circulated to the mass media or journals, etc. They are very local to a certain group of people who decide whether or not your research proposal can be funded. So here there's no problem. I mean, even if you cite your own, write about your earlier work without forgetting to cite it, etc., doesn't matter. So as such, the self-plagiarisms can be permitted when you write, say, funding proposals. But this is the only place where there is no offense when you do a self-plagiarism. So then the other type is this need not be just in written form. Okay. So this is now I'm coming to the matter of idea plagiarism. Okay. So suppose there's a scientist who makes a fairly detailed presentation of a very novel idea, and now this particular idea would have been actually proposed by someone else who probably may not have actually published it or even publicized it. Okay. Now, if you talk about that idea, which you might have heard, overheard from someone, or you have listened to someone else talking about it, and then you start talking about it yourself, without mentioning that you have heard it earlier from someone else, okay, then what happens is that the audience, your audience, where before whom you are speaking, they will feel that you are the originator of the idea, which is wrong, because you were never the originator of the idea. You had got the idea from someone else whom you happened to listen to somewhere else, and now you are trying to put it forward, saying that it is your own idea. Or even if you are not uh, intended, the audience will feel that since you have not referred to the earlier work by someone else, they will feel that it is your own work. Okay. So plagiarism can take place in different manners and different ways, and then it can also have very different consequences. So let us see what could be the possible consequences when you actually do plagiarism. So I'll again now give you certain consequences which have instances which I have picked up again from Miguel Roy of the ORI. I start with the first one. There is a historian who has had to resign from the Pulitzer board. Okay, and this was because, yeah. So this guy, who is a historian, he had to resign from the Pulitzer board because there were allegations that she had actually appropriated text from other sources in one of her books. So if such a person happens to be on the board of a Pulitzer Award, which deals out Pulitzer Awards, it is highly unethical. So then there was one instance where such a person had to resign. Then newspaper journalist, a writer for a newspaper who was found to have plagiarized material for some of his articles, he had to resign from his position. Then there was a biochemist who had to resign from a very prestigious clinic after accusations that a book he wrote actually had appropriated portions of text from a NAS report. And there was even, I mean, the field of music is not spared. A famous musician was found guilty of unconscious plagiarism by including elements of another music group which had previously recorded this song in one of his new songs, which had become a hit. I'm sure most of you would have heard about this new movie called Kantara or something. I don't know the exact pronunciation, where one of the hit songs in that had to face this same problem, where there was another person who said that the tune of the song was actually plagiarized from one of his earlier songs. So this can happen even in the field of music. Then there was a college president, that is like a vice chancellor. He had to resign because again there was allegation that he failed to attribute source of material which was a part of a college convocation speech. It was a very innocuous thing. Then there was a politician who had his master's degree resigned after finding of plagiarism in some of his academic papers. And similarly, an education minister had to resign from a position, and because the university actually resigned her doctoral degree for plagiarism. So, like that, there are many such consequences for plagiarism, and they are quite severe. So basically, what happens is that your credibility and your standing among your fellow scientists, etc., that gets totally damaged. Then there can be legal issues. Okay, there can be some heavy fines also, certain in certain countries, and then there is a question of violation of copyright laws. So this is also a very important thing, and violation of copyrights can land you in very difficult situations. And because your bread and butter are your publications, if you are unable to publish your papers, then how are you going to be rated? So you can have publishing difficulties at a later stage in your career, and then there could be very severe academic penalties. Like if you are in a position in a university or a government research center, then your promotion avenues could be affected, and in a more severe manner, probably you may have to be you have to face suspension or even resignation. You may be asked to resign from your position also. So there are some very severe consequences resulting from plagiarism. Then you come to the question, and you ask the question, why do people actually plagiarize? So why, I mean, in spite of knowing about all the severe consequences, etc., why do people plagiarize, and why is it still a fairly rampant situation in the world? Now the problem is you need to know what is how scientific research is taken up and how it is carried out. If you look at competitive research, okay, basically what is competitive research? You try to create something new, you try to invent something or a new process. Basically, you're trying to create some new knowledge. A new knowledge or a new invention, you cannot invent it again. And I mean, once it is invented, it is invented. That's it. So you cannot create this new knowledge twice over. There's only once it is created. Then it's next is all copied. So either you'll be the first person who actually goes across the line, either you will be the first person, or if you are not the first person, you will be an also ran. So you are going to be the second, third, fourth. So there cannot be two first persons as it is. Okay. So you're a first person or you're an also ran. Now the problem is if you are an also ran, it becomes again quite difficult to publish your work in a high impact journal. Okay, because all journals they look for novelty, they ask you what is the novel part of your research. Not only journals, even funding agencies, they ask you what is the novelty of your research that we have to fund your research. And so novelty is one issue that people are always looking for. So if your work is not novel in any manner, then why should the journal publish, or why should the funding agency give you funds? So then if you face such a situation, then if you're unable to publish your papers, then completing your degree will become an issue. So because of this problem, what is the resultant effect? The resultant effect is a mad scramble to be first, okay, in this race. So when you have this cutting edge research, if you are doing cutting edge research, you always want to be the first to achieve something, okay. And because of the severe pressure of wanting to be the first person to discover or whatever, you get into trouble. Then there's temptation. So people fall prey to this temptation, and then they adopt fairly devious means or unethical methods to obtain publications. Then sometimes this plagiarism is like a pathological disease. Like once you start doing it, you become heady and you go on doing it. Okay, so once a plagiarist, often a plagiarist, and so once you get a stamp that you have plagiarized something, so it is very difficult to remove that stamp from yourself. Okay. The other possibility is that you have lack of confidence in your own abilities. Okay, so suppose you feel that you are unable to carry out some complicated research work. Okay, then again you take an easy recourse and try to do plagiarism. Then time management. See, most of the research nowadays involves proper management of time. You have a requirement that a particular research has to be finished, say, in a time scale of say 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years at the most. Most of the funding agencies, they give money to complete the research, say, in 3 years' time. So now you have to finish everything in that time period. Now, if you are unable to do that, then again you are under pressure. Somehow or the other, by hook or crook, you have to meet the deadlines and then publish your results. And this again makes people turn unethical. Then again, as I said in one of my previous lectures, you have this uh, very pernicious practice of publish or perish. So, because many of the positions, especially abroad, they are tenure track positions. So you have a mandated condition that every year you have to produce certain number of papers. So you are under severe pressure. It's not so easy to go on publishing a paper every month or every sometimes even less than that. So again, this is another pressure which plays upon people, and they take recourse to plagiarism. Then there's another reason which is rank laziness. So we are so lazy to undertake research, or rather, sophisticated research, that you simply sit on your chair and then you just simply copy others' work and then try to pass it off as your own work. Then, of course, there are another category of people who like to do this just for the thrill of the whole thing. Okay, they feel that look, I am so clever and that I'll never be caught in this game. So you have this kind of a feeling sometimes, and some people have this. And so, just for that sake of thrill and that adrenaline of that rush, or the thought that you will not be caught at all, that makes you go on doing this plagiarism. Then there's another problem which arises mostly from language difficulties. So you do very poor paraphrasing of some previous work which you have seen, or you unintentionally miss out on certain citations which you should have actually properly cited in your work. Okay, that was not intentional on your part, but either because of your language skill, or you have not bothered to, or you were too sloppy to notice this, that you have missed out on certain citations. Then you also have lack of awareness of copyright laws. Okay, this is another very important thing which, as a young scientist, one should be aware of what are all these copyright laws for journals, etc., and how they are followed by different countries. So it is very important to be aware of these laws. And there are sometimes some local rules, etc., which govern in certain countries. One has to be aware of these norms. Okay, so then I have shown you what are the why do people plagiarize. So now we come to the standards which were laid down by the University Grants Commission on how to categorize the different degrees of plagiarism. So the UGC in its gazette, they have very clearly specified these values. So they have attributed 4 levels starting from 0 to level 3. So the level 0 of plagiarism would mean that a particular software or some algorithm has found that your paper has similarities up to 10% with some previously published papers. So up to 10%, it is considered that they are minor similarities and there are no penalties involved in this case. Then come the next serious one, which is level 1. So here the similarities are above 10% but below 40%. And then we have level 2 similarities where they are between 40% to 60%. Similarity means as found by the plagiarism softwares. And then finally we have level 3 where the similarities are above 60%. So this is the most severe of all, like you're literally almost copying the whole paper as it is from the previous publication. Okay. So these are the four levels which have been laid down by UGC. So now let us see what are the other levels of plagiarism followed by, say, the other countries or sometimes other research, I would say research entities like IEEE, for example. And IEEE is the Institution of Electrical Engineers or something like that. And so they have prescribed certain different type of categorization. Here the categorization works in a reverse way. So that means level 1 is the most severe of all plagiarism, while level 5 happens to be the most minor. So when you go to see at level 1 plagiarism as given by IEEE, here what it means is that you have an uncredited verbatim copying of a full paper or verbatim copying of a major portion which is more than 50% of the original paper. So this is level 1, which is similar to level 3 in our UGC. Then level 2 has uncredited verbatim copying of a large portion, but which is less than 50% of the manuscript or the previous paper. Then level 3 is uncredited copying of individual elements, that there are certain blocks of words or sentences and figures which have been copied. Then level 4 is uncredited improper paraphrasing of pages or paragraphs. And finally level 5, which is the most minor, is credited verbatim copying of a major portion of a paper but without clear delineation. What do you mean by saying delineation? You have to put some quotes or an underline or an indent of the portion of the text which has been copied. If you do not give this quotes or delineation, then again it is considered a minor offense. So now in the Indian scenario, as laid down by UGC Gazette, for PhD thesis or dissertations, for level 0 similarity, that is less than 10%, they are called minor similarities and there is no penalty at all. And for the next level, that is level 1, where similarities are between 10 to 40%, the student shall be asked to submit a revised script within a stipulated time period which does not exceed 6 months. Then the next level, that is 2, where the similarities are above 40% but below 60%, such a student shall be debarred from submitting a revised script for a period of 1 year. See, this itself is going to be quite severe for a student, especially when it's a case of a PhD thesis. Because you see, when you submit a PhD thesis after a work of about 5 years, and you take about 6 months to write up your thesis at the end, and then you submit it, and if it is found that the similarities in the thesis are above 40%, then a straight away debarment of 1 year is going to prove very costly, because you're losing 1 year for almost, for this simple, straight away whatever you have done, this an unethical thing of plagiarizing some 40 to 60%. And above 60%, that is level 3, the punishment is very severe. The registration of the student itself for the PhD program shall be totally cancelled. So imagine at the end of 5 years, you find that the entire work which you have done has come to just zero, because you are simply asked to get out. So the consequences for students, especially trying to impress upon all of you is that it is very severe when you try to plagiarize from others' works without giving proper attribution. Okay. So please, I request all of you to keep this in mind that this is a very, very serious thing, and for never assume that you will be able to get away from here, because nowadays it is very easy to catch this kind of plagiarism in you see, let me tell you about, say, my own. When I finished my PhD thesis, we never had any software at all. Okay, we never even knew about this word of plagiarism. Okay, so such things never existed in those days. There was no software. Nobody talked about it, unless, of course, people noticed it at that point of time and they were corrected. But we never had this kind of softwares to check, etc., and all those things. And but we were all the time warned by our supervisors, etc. And thankfully, okay, those days ethical people were more in number, I guess. And we were all warned about these things and said that okay, you have to be original in your own work. So we were stuck to that. So it automatically got done. But nowadays, in these days, everything is open and easily it can be noticed without any problem. Now, for the case of journal publications, again, the consequences are quite severe, especially if the faculty is involved in this. So again, for level 0, which is less than 10%, minor considered as minor similarities, there are no penalties at all. And then for the level 1, which is 10 to 40% similarity, you are asked to withdraw the manuscript, and that is also still reasonable. But if this level 2 is 40 to 60%, first of all, you'll be asked to withdraw the manuscript. Then the faculty who is employed, he will be denied a right to 1 annual increment, and that is really severe. And then the person is not allowed to be a supervisor for any new student, MPhil, PhD, etc., for a period of 2 years. And this can be quite bad if a person is heavily involved in research and you are unable to take students for more than 2 years after what you have done. And then when the similarities are above 60%, again, you are asked to withdraw the manuscript. You are denied a right, the faculty is denied a right to 2 successive annual increments. And then you will not be allowed to be a supervisor for almost a period of 3 years, which is again even, it's very bad actually. So the consequences and the punishments are extremely bad even in our country now. So not only students, even the faculty or the advisors must be aware of these issues, and you better be careful when you write up and publish your results. Okay, now I just briefly touch upon some case histories in plagiarism. This was a very interesting article which appeared in a journal called IJACSA. It's a journal which is based on data sciences. So there was an article like it was called a data science framework for data quality assessment and inconsistency detection. So what happened was the editor of the journal, he got a letter from a person who wrote like this: a few days ago, I came across a data science article titled so and so, published in your journal, volume so and I'm extremely upset to discover that there almost all the sections, algorithms, and even plots are unoriginal and deliberately copied from the previously published work of mine. This person was actually a student, a master's student who submitted his master's thesis in the University of Waterloo, and that was, of course, it was available on internet. So these set of authors, they intentionally copied the entire thing, and then they simply published it as their own uh, work. So then, based on this information which was obtained from the original author, the editor immediately acted on this, and then he retracted This paper, after careful and considered review of the content of the paper by a duly constituted expert committee, this paper has been found to be in violation of this publication principles, and we hereby retract the content of this paper, and reasonable effort should be made to remove all past references to this paper. So that's a very damning statement to be made by a journal against an author who has actually plagiarized a previous work. Then there was another interesting case history. This was published in a journal uh, called Vision by some publisher from Gurgaon. Unfortunately, India now happens to be the hotbed for a lot of these very, highly doubtful journals. You never know what their standing is or what their reputation, etc. Uh, but anyway, this is one such journal. I have never heard of it, of course. Is published by MDI Gurgaon. So this paper, which was published, again it had some problem, and this was a byline from two Indian bylines, and then two foreigners were also there. Then somebody noticed that there was a problem with this paper, and immediately the first author, he wrote an apology letter to the editor saying that my name is Babin Das, and I requested Professor Meyer and Dr. Moon to assist me in getting a paper published in Vision, and the paper's name is so and so. Then I am a PhD student in India, and I needed a publication in order to submit my thesis. I am the first author of the manuscript, and I admit that I obtained the paper in an unethical behavior made by myself only. Okay. I did not write the paper, but I told my co-authors, whom I requested to assist me in the publication process, that it was my work. I lied to them and may have gotten them in trouble. They have only assisted me so far, and I apologize for my mistake in this issue. None of the co-authors was aware of my unethical behavior. I will immediately request that the paper be retracted from the journal, and I apologize for my mistakes. Kindly forgive me. Now, to me, it looks quite highly doubtful whether he was the original writer of this letter. I'm sure he was in cahoots with his own supervisor, who simply tried to do all these things, and now he has put the entire blame on the student and asked him to write an apology letter. But then you see, it really comes to nothing, because the person who suffers will be again the student. The student suffers more, and as well as the supervisor also, if he falls under the ambit of the UGC rules. Then I show you another very interesting situation of plagiarism. This was a paper published in Physical Review B. This person, of course, is a very well-known professor in India. So in this paper, in Physical Review, he wrote a sentence which I have highlighted in yellow. The direction and the magnitude of the shielding current for any change in the external field is assumed to be such so as to minimize the change of the total flux contained in the sample. Now the funny thing is that this particular sentence was straight away lifted from a previously published article in 2001, which is given here. And once, of course, it was Dr. Chadda who was he was the first author of this paper. And then he wrote to the editor immediately, and then they have put an erratum. The journal has brought out an erratum mentioning that the reference number 8 is missing at the end of the third sentence in this section. That means Here at the end of the section, the proper attribution to the earlier work should have been given, especially more so when the entire sentence was taken in toto from the previous paper. It should have been, in fact, in quotes also. That was not done. Not only that, they didn't even give the reference number here. So a casual reader who will read this text will assume that this entire text is an original contribution from this author. Okay, so now you see the effect how this plagiarism can do. So it is very vital that you have to keep on referring to your earlier works so that your own initial out of the box contributions can be highlighted and then continued. And similarly, there was another paper. What happened was way back in 1976, oh, sorry, not 1976, 1975, there was a paper published by Chadda and V.C. Sani in Nuclear Physics and Solid State Physics, India. This is nothing but the yearly, in those days it was called the Nuclear Physics and Solid State Physics Symposium, which is held by DAE. Now both these two are separate. Nuclear Physics Symposium is separate and Solid State Physics Symposium is separate. Both are organized by the Department of Atomic Energy. And they are considered fairly prestigious meetings, not because of any impact factor or anything like that, but because these two conferences, they bring together almost the entire scientists in these two fields in the country together every year. So they had published a paper in this conference, and they followed it up with a paper in Physica Status Solidi. This is not a very high impact journal. It's a East European journal, but all the same they had published it in that paper, in that journal. Now what has happened is that this guy, McIntyre from University of Houston, he worked exactly on the same problem, okay, and he did the same, he worked on the same problem as well as the idea also, but in this paper, he never cited any of these works, okay. So again, after pointing out to the editor, there was an errata which was published saying that it has been pointed out that some observations in the paper, that is this paper, it's not observation, actually they were real ideas, okay. So imagine here that he has also managed to convert the ideas into a word observation. So these observations in the paper had been stated previously and appropriate references should be added. Okay, so that kind of an errata was published later after this paper was published. So this is again an instance of an idea plagiarism which has taken place. And then more recently, there was another paper published by Sarkar, Prolong and Rao. This guy Rao, actually, he is now of course retired. He's an extremely big person in France. He was the director of one of the very big laboratories on condensed matter in France. And they published a paper in which they used a certain set of words, and the words are this: cooling and heating in unequal field, and it was also given an acronym CHUF. This was a certain protocol in a measurement, a magnetic measurement. Now they use this entire word chuff and this term here without attributing it to anyone else, because this particular acronym chuff was first coined by these people in this paper, and they had several subsequent papers after this. This was in 2009. Again in 2009 itself, and 10 as well as 11, this group published several papers and they were the first to actually call this protocol chuff. But then these people, they used exactly the same term without citing it in their paper that it was previously coined by someone else. Now for a reader who may not have seen this paper, for example, and if he reads this paper, he feels that these three authors have actually coined this acronym CHUF, which is ethically totally wrong. They had nothing to contribute in this terminology. It was totally, this idea was initiated by Dr. Chadda. So you can see the effect here. So then, of course, again, once you write to the editor of the journal, they have published an erratum saying that the authors did not cite a relevant and important reference. This acronym CHUF protocol that has been used and described in this paper was first published in this reference, and we apologize for this omission. But then, okay, even if you have this kind of an erratum which is coming out, does it really close the issue? The problem is something else. Even if an erratum, the copying is noticed and an erratum is published, the problem is that the erratum is published much later, and a person who reads the first this paper has no idea that this paper has actually an erratum which has been published later. So if you look at the citations which were received later, the original paper by these three authors had 25 citations, whereas the erratum which was published much later had only 6 citations. So the plagiarizing paper was cited 25 times, but the correction was cited only 6 times. So that means it implies there is no closure even after the experts and the editors, they seek an apology from the original authors. So the only solution for this would be that, of course, now some journals have started doing this. So when you have a problem paper and then you publish an erratum in that after some time, subsequently, whenever anyone tries to download this problem paper, automatically the erratum also should get linked to this and then get downloaded, so that a lay reader for the first time who is trying to read this paper, he will immediately realize that there was a history behind this paper and there was an erratum published. So not all journals have started this, but certain journals like Journal of Physics Condensed Matter, etc., they have started this now, that if there is a problem of plagiarism or even minor way or whichever way where an erratum has been published, you see the best result for a plagiarization would be that plagiarized paper, I mean the paper in which the plagiarizing has been done should be totally retracted from circulation. That is the best closure, of course. But if it is not just a question of erratum, then the erratum must be linked to this problem paper, so that whoever downloads this problem paper will all get this erratum also automatically downloaded with that. Okay. Then there was another group here. This is a slightly different kind of a plagiarism. There was a Japanese group, again a very top lab in Japan. Kainuma is the head of the lab, and here initial papers of this group referred to this term kinetic arrest, which was again coined by this group from Indore for the first time. And but then subsequently what they try to do is they try to avoid calling it by that same name. So here you can see, though kinetic arrest was referred to close to 100 times, many times in this paper, the manuscript has no reference to our contribution. This was apparently noticed by the editors at some late stage, and 2 references to our works appear as additional relevant references in the final print version. Okay, so that they still have some closure here. Okay, but then these guys, they were very clever. So after this happened here, what they did in the subsequent papers, they even tried to change the terminology of this effect completely. So what they try to do is, here they call it this particular phenomena, whatever it is, instead of calling it kinetic arrest, they call it thermal transformation arrest. So if you read their paper, the sentence, it says that Martensitic transformation is kinetically arrested in a high magnetic field, exhibiting a first order phase transformation from antiferromagnetism to ferromagnetism. We have also observed the thermal transformation arrest, which was called kinetic arrest in our previous papers. So what are they trying to do? They are now trying to avoid stating that term so that they don't have to refer to the previous work which actually started this whole field. So it is possible that they were actually changing the terminology of that effect with the likely intention of not giving the original authors credit. So this is also another very smart way of plagiarization. Okay. So you change the terminology of the idea itself so that you don't have to say that it has been discovered by someone else earlier. So this is another of that same thing. They were changing the terminology, but the reviewers tried to protect us by giving us some credit. So again, the reviewers and the editors of the journals have a very important role to play here. And one moment something is noticed of this kind of thing happening, that they will try to stop it and then give proper credit. Then there could be another kind of plagiarization which can happen, which is totally out of your hands. What happened was, there was in June 2015, this person Danziger, he submitted a manuscript to a journal called Annals in Microbiology or something. It was titled with some name, and then after an external peer review, of course, it was rejected or something like that, and we decided not to publish. But then what happened was, very soon, in another 1 year or so, Danziger noticed that exactly the same paper which he submitted to the journal, okay, this paper was published by a different set of authors with the same figures, everything same. Then he was stunned when he saw this manuscript, because it was his own manuscript which was not published in that journal Annals. So he became aware of an article published in another journal, Excli, that was almost identical to the manuscript which he and his colleagues had submitted to Annals. His concern was that the reviewer may have misappropriated the content of his manuscript, plagiarized the work, and published it as his own in another journal. Okay, so then we determined that an author of the article in this Excli journal was in fact someone who reviewed the manuscript which he had submitted earlier for the Annals journal. So this was of course found out immediately, and then that particular paper was retracted and withdrawn. And then he wrote a very interesting letter. This Danziger wrote a very interesting letter to the in the journal, to Annals, addressed it to the reviewer indirectly. He calls him "Dear Doctor." Okay, I'm aware that you recently submitted to wrongly publishing as your own a scientific research paper that I submitted to Annals of Internal Medicine. After serving as an peer reviewer, external peer reviewer of our manuscript, you published the same manuscript, okay, in a different medical journal a few months later. You removed the names of the authors and the research address, replacing them with the names of your co-authors and your institution. And then he went on to describe how much effort he put in for that paper. 5 years of conceptualization of the study to publication. Okay, that much time he spent on that. So all that went waste because this reviewer so unethically misappropriated that paper and then published it as his own. And this happens quite often, unfortunately. And many people, especially from India also, they find that suddenly their papers are rejected, but the same results or similar results are published by someone else from another country. Okay, so this is something which can happen also. So then recently what happened was Nature, the journal Nature has chronicled an epidemic of plagiarism involving political figures in Europe. Okay, some minister in Germany, he plagiarized material for his law thesis. Then some president of a country, imagine a president of a country, his thesis on physical education contained plagiarized material. then a prime minister of a country, okay, continues to dismiss well-founded accusation that he plagiarized sources for his law thesis. And we highlight widespread plagiarism in Romania's universities, and many academics there don't seem to realize why this is a problem. So it's quite often you find that people high up in the government, okay, not only politicians, and in fact scientists also sometimes, they get caught up in this plagiarism issues. So then what is the closure? So as I said, the best closure is a complete retraction of the paper, plagiarized paper indicates a full closure for the author whose work or idea has been actually plagiarized. However, there are in cases where there's an erratum or an apology or correction, no proper closure can be really happening because no one bothers about erratum. Okay, this Yeah, sorry, sorry for the interruption. So I won't take more time now. So this I have already talked about that if this is just an erratum or an apology, the journal must link this erratum to the main paper, which actually plagiarizes some other previous work. Okay, then so how to avoid plagiarism? Always cite the original source. Then you do proper summarizing and paraphrasing. And how do you do this? You must read the particular passage which you would like to write about. Then try to assimilate that particular passage. Then don't look at the original passage. Try to just identify the main points which you want to include. And without looking at the original passage, you should try to write down that main idea in your own words. Then after you write down that in your own words, you compare what you have written down with the original and see whether there's any matching, any similarity is there. And if there's no similarity, you're safe. Okay, so this is how one should try to do summarizing and paraphrasing, and then try to avoid plagiarism at any cost because it is a very unethical practice. Just don't do it. If you don't get caught now, you'll definitely get caught later. And just simply give credit wherever it is due. That's all. Unfortunately, it's a tendency, especially in Indian scientists, not to give credit to others. And try to avoid the self plagiarism by giving proper references to your earlier work. And because this issue can come back and haunt you much later. And then again, if you're a student, you must try to protect yourself very well, especially when you have out of the box ideas where they can be easily knocked off by others if you don't happen to publish it. So don't try to get scooped by others. One small advice I can give you here is that there are two things one should do. One is that if you especially feel that you have a very novel idea, publish it at least in an archive like condensed matter archive or biochemistry archive, etc., which are easily accessible, and publish it in that so that at least your idea will have a timestamp. Okay. And then another way not to get scooped is that whenever you have an idea or a result or whatever it is, do not indiscriminately discuss it before publishing with others whom you have no connection, especially people who come at conferences, people from abroad. These guys are full of ears and eyes, so they are always looking for interesting ideas and results. So make sure that your idea and your results are safe. And then once you are able to put it together, first thing one should do is put it in an archive so that you retain the timestamp and you retain your ownership of your idea. Okay. So thank you very much. I think this was a fairly long lecture. So let's see. We'll meet again. If you have any questions, you can. Uh, any questions, please? नहीं नहीं नहीं. Yeah, let's take the example of what was that? Was a question there. नहीं अभी आया था उधर. नहीं इसको क्लोज करना पड़ेगा कुछ. गूगल हाँ क्लोज करो. Yeah, now to. Yeah. Let's take the example of series of journal articles you publish as a part of one's doctoral research. When one writes his thesis, how does she include the work in a form of a major part that form a major part of this paper? Yeah. So again, when you're writing your thesis, see, you have already published this work in form of a paper. No problem. You go on writing up your thesis work, but wherever you keep mentioning that you give a reference to your own publication, you say that, look, this work I have published in the form of a paper at so and so journal. That's it. Nothing else is required. You write your thesis in a normal way like you write any thesis, but at the end of any when you ascribe your previous published work in the thesis, you can just put a reference there saying that, look, this particular work has been already published by me, okay, in this reference, so that it is known that this thesis is again a result of all this work which has been also published, and that is taken in a positive manner. Okay, people will always take it in a positive manner that before you have written up your thesis, you have already published so many papers emanating from your own research work. There's no problem. Yeah. YouTube. Yeah, one second. Is there no way out to identify idea plagiarism then? Please explain once again where self-plagiarism is involved. Allowed. Is allowed. Acha, acha. See, see, self-plagiarism is allowed means, see, you can cite your, you can write about your previous work. There's no issue. But then you have to give a citation to that, saying that I have already published this particular line as in my previous work. That is what when you say that self-plagiarism is avoided. But when you're considering trying to write up a proposal for funding, then there is no issue. Okay, for funding there's no problem. Cross cover. For funding purposes, there's no question of any self-plagiarism. But only, okay, there was something else you said, idea plagiarism, that there is no way to identify idea plagiarism. It's very difficult because you have an idea. Unfortunately, you have talked about it to someone, and or you have spoken about it in a group of people, and someone in that group decides to pick up that idea and then work on it and publish. So, of course, you will identify at the end when the work is published, and you will realize it's your own idea. But then it's too late. That's why I said, be careful when you have an idea, be protective about it, and publish it as soon as possible, or at least put it in an archive. Yeah. Next. What is the other one? YouTube, you said something? Check. Okay. Anyone else was there? No. Yeah, you had some question quickly.
Sir, you mentioned we need to cite the original source. Suppose that is plagiarism is cascaded from A to B to C. How?
Ah, yeah, that is a interesting question. Yes, that is a possibility is there. But see, as long as you are concerned, you have picked it up from a paper which you have seen earlier. That is enough for as far as you are concerned. What that fellow has done, that is his problem. That is not your problem. You have at least stated that it has been published earlier by by this guy in this paper, and I am attributing this quote to that paper. So that is enough. There was one more small question there. Yeah, if we quote words or paragraphs and give credit to the original author, will that be uh, considered as plagiarism? Because when I checked for plagiarism on one of my papers, they showed it as no, no, no. So here, okay, the way, okay, I'll tell you how to do this in my next lecture probably. I have already told in this lecture once that when you take words, quote words from some other paper, just giving a reference citation is not enough. You have to put it in quotations or do an indentation of that particular line. Only then it is considered that it is taken from that particular original source. If you do not put this indenting or quotations, then it is still considered a what I said, that verbatim, unintended verbatim copying, etc. Okay, so you have to insert those words or that paragraph or a sentence in a quotation marks or an indent, and then give a citation also. So that's the way it will stop saying that it is a plagiarized version. Yeah. You please try that. You put that in quotes and then you see, run it again. I'm sure it will say.
Because only 2%. That is okay.
Yeah, yeah. Still, if it's just 2%, you're safe. Okay, so thank you very much. I think we have come to the end of this lecture. Thank you.
घड़ी लेके बैठा है